Hello and welcome to the Pediatric Network. Today we're going to be focused on baby-led weaning, and to take us through this we're going to be speaking with Sister Samantha Crompton, who is a nurse and lactation consultant. So Sister Sam is going to be talking us through where the idea of baby-led weaning came from. She's going to be talking us through how it works, the pitfalls that one might be worried about as a parent and as a healthcare provider, and she's also going to talk us through some of the evidence around baby-led weaning. Now, I would suggest that you have a look at the comments of this video as well, because we're going to be putting a host of resources in there that we speak about in the interview. So, without further ado, here is myself and Sister Samantha Crompton talking baby-led weaning. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Mike Marinas. I'm your chiropractor and host here. And today we are speaking with Sister Samantha Crompton. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm very good. Can't complain. Thanks for having me on your show again.
It's always wonderful to be able to chat with you. Now, the reason that we've got you on the show today is we want to talk about baby-led weaning. It's something that we kind of hear about. I'm sure a lot of us are kind of like, is that a thing? Is it a fad? Is it something I should be investing time in? And then you get people going, oh, okay, this sounds good. Now where do I go and what do I do? So I want to kind of get a nice balanced idea of what we're talking about when we talk about baby-led weaning. But to get a good idea, let's talk about, where did baby-led weaning come from?
So that's always a good question. And just to say, I gave me a lot of my resources from Dr. Amy Brown, because she's one of the leaders who researched this and she's one of the advocates for it. Mm-hmm. And what she's saying is that where it came from is, she actually thinks it was here long ago. This is how babies were actually eating. And then it sort of disappeared and we started puring foods and things like that. And then around 10 to 15 years ago, the WHO moved their thoughts when babies should start solids from 4 months to around 6 months. And with that change, this led to saying, well, do we then have to puree foods, or can we maybe start looking at letting the babies sort of do more a responsive feeding type of feeding, and do we have to puree foods? So I think that was the basis for the start of it, is that the kids are that 2 months older when they were starting their solids, so they were a little bit more developed, a little bit more capable for this type of feeding. And that's sort of where it originated from, I think, was that change in the guidelines from where we started introducing solids. Yeah.
Because as you're talking now, I'm reminded of looking through the ways to work out that a child is ready for solids, and one of those is that they can pop their hand out, grab food, and pop it into their mouth. Yeah. So baby-led weaning is literally one of the tenets of going, I'm ready to now eat solids.
Yeah, absolutely. And the 4-month-old baby, where we were 10 years ago, where we were starting babies on solids at 17 weeks. A 17-week-old baby can never do that. They can't pick up something and put it in their mouth. That's where they have to have their food pureed, and we have to spoon feed them. Where a 6-month-old baby is far more capable of doing that themselves. So absolutely leads into that developmental issue.
Okay, so we worked out where it's come from. Now let's talk about, if I'm then keen to start doing baby-led weaning, where do I begin?
Yeah. So I think I always tell moms the first place to start is to say, is your baby actually ready for solids? And that's where we start going through that checklist that you have. So I don't like to put a weight, a time, a date on it, because then we're sort of grouping all these babies into everyone is the same. Okay. I like to rather say, let's look at your baby and see where your baby's at. So that's where we look at things like, are they able to hold their head up? Are they able to sit unattended? So they don't have to sit completely on their own, but we don't want babies sort of flopping all over the place. We look at things like, have they lost their tongue extrusion reflex? What's their gag reflex looking like? Are they, as you mentioned now, are they grasping for things? Are they showing any interest in eating food? And then we start looking at the nutritional side. Are they demanding more milk feeds for longer than 2 weeks? We have to decide, is this a growth spurt, or is this really them now needing to start solids? So we look at all those nutritional elements as well. And once we know that our babies are ready for food, and then baby-led weaning, we recommend only start from around 6 months. So once those babies have reached all those milestones, they should be around the 6-month mark. And that's when you can say, okay, let's start this process now. And I do recommend lots of reading.
Okay, yeah.
From the mom's side, from the parent side.
I was about to say, to start off, that is a wonderful little checklist just to be able to go through. And then obviously, like you said, put your baby in context of them being an individual, because it's not about going 5 kilos or 10 kilos, and not about going, they are this old, because one 6-month-old and another 6-month-old are very different from each other. So we need to be able to put all of that together.
And, if you look at the weights, traditionally we always just said you start solids when they've doubled their birth weight. But, then I have moms who have this 2 kilo prem baby or 1.8 prem baby. And then at 4 kilos, they're saying, should I now start solids? And you're like, no, this baby's not ready yet.
On milk yet,
Exactly. And then you've got the mom who has a 4.5 kilo baby. Must she now wait till this baby's 9 kilos? I don't like putting a strict thing, but it's true. I mean, if we're doubling the birth weight, then that's what we're doing.
So those are, could we comfortably say that those are guidelines? And then you can use those guidelines, but you have to put into perspective with the rest of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. You never have one thing, and that's the thing with the checklist or whatever. When you tick one, you don't go, okay, I've ticked one, now we start. You have to sort of have a good majority of them before we ready to dive into this.
I get you. So what is baby-led weaning? What does it look like? What are we doing, and why is it different from normal feeding?
Okay, so traditionally what we've done is we used to puree the food, and then we used to spoon feed it to the babies. And then only at around sort of 8-9 months did we start then introducing some texture, if you could put it that way. We used to then not blend it as smooth, and then eventually we chopped it up. And then only at around a year were these kids now starting to eat sort of finger foods, I put it that way. So what baby-led weaning is looking at, they're saying, let's see if these babies are capable. Why are we going through the whole pureeing the food, and moving on from a texture point of view so slowly? Why not let's let these babies from around 6 months, when they're developmentally ready to do this, to actually start by eating finger foods? Because that way and what I like about the principles of a lot of baby-led weaning, they're saying that way these babies are using all their senses when they're learning to eat. So as an example, I always use this. If you're going to give the baby a piece of pineapple, for example, a lot of the baby-led weaning principles say, cut it into a finger strip so the baby can hold it nicely, but you leave on the prickly bit, you leave on the white bit, and you leave on the nice sort of yellow, juicy, sweet bit. And what the baby's learning is they're touching this and they're going, oh, that's prickly. And their natural sense is like, I probably shouldn't eat that. Okay. Then they'll taste it, and then they go, yeah, definitely not the prickly bit. And then they taste the white bit and they go, that's quite hard and quite bitter. You know what? I'm not that keen on that part. And then they eat the nice yellow sweet bit and they go, yeah, this is the game. This is what I want to eat. And by doing that, if you think from a sensory point of view, what they've done, they've felt it, they've tasted it, they've smelt it, they've seen it, maybe they've heard it, so they're using all their senses. And that's such a good thing from a safety point of view. So now when they're in the garden and they feel the stone or the prickly leaf or something, they're going to go, no, I remember, I don't eat that, So they're potentially not going to then put it in their mouth, eat the stone, eat the random bitter berry, so that's some of the principles around this. Is it's a more holistic learning experience than being spoon-fed a bit of puree that they actually don't know what it is.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. I mean, there's no choice in that, and it just moves into their mouth, and they go, "Well, that's what it is." And there's and learning opportunities that could be gained by going through this are just amazing, because they're doing it for themselves, which is wonderful.
Exactly.
So
that's what we want them to do.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole name of the game. I think every mom and dad that I see, top of the list on their agenda Is my baby developing properly, and am I doing all the things that I could be doing to give them the best head start? And this giving them learning experiences is the best.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So how do I know that it's going well?
So
is it that my kitchen is covered in food?
You see, this is where from an early start, and you know me, we speak about this lots, where I teach parents they need to trust their bodies. So like the moms have to trust their bodies to develop their babies during pregnancy. They have to trust their bodies to breastfeed their babies. And now I think if you've built up a lot of that trust, you've really now by 6 months learning to trust your gut a little bit on this. So there's obviously measures, things like, is your baby actually gaining weight? Are they staying on their milestones? Developmentally, are they in the correct place? So we look at all of those things. Those are the hard measures. You know, if your baby suddenly drops off the weight curve, definitely something's gone wrong. Okay. Then we look at, is the baby actually consuming some of their foods? Are they trying all new things? Is it a fight? Is it a, are we, and I think that's with any feeding, whether it's pureed food or whether it's baby-led weaning food, whether it's finger foods, those are the measures we're looking at, is if it's going well. And if the babies are starting to really enjoy eating and this isn't becoming a war, because that's what happens a lot with the feeding is, the parents want them to eat so much, and babies don't always want to eat so much, and then we see how it's going from there. And also to remember, in the first 6 months that we do the baby-led weaning or any feeding, it's complementary, and that's why it's called complementary feeding, because your milk feeds still stay your main source of nutrition, so those don't change. And then only slowly but surely through the second 6 months of the baby's life do they start dropping their milk feeds, and it becomes less and less. And only around a year is your complementary food now becoming your main source of food, and your milk feeds are becoming complementary. So you've got this window of time to figure it out, to get things right. And I think that's a mindset we need to think, because sometimes we think, okay, when they start solids now, this is their main source of food. Yes. And so they have to get this right. And that's what puts the pressure on. Where if you remember that the milk feed is still the main source of nutrition. And I always use the example, say to mom, well, if we're going to give them 30 grams of butternut, how much nutrition is that versus the 120 mils of breast milk or formula, or whatever they're getting? So, you don't stress yourself out about that 30 grams of butternut.
So that first 6 months is we're learning textures, we're learning what things feel like. We are adding this into our normal day-to-day. It's quite a different thing, and I suppose also the internal workings of the GIT are going to take a bit of time. See that a lot when we start off with solids. Poos start to change, bowel habits start to change. So over time, and as you wonderfully said now, it's only by 1 year that we're starting to look at that being the main source of calories.
Yeah. So obviously another measure is if your baby is now still demanding loads and loads of milk feeds and really not taking to the food, then we have to look and say, after a month or two, now they're sitting at 8 months, you have to say, like, they really need to start upping their food intake now. Then we'll look at it. But, if they more or less eating what you're putting in front of them, and that's where portion control comes in as well. You've got to decide, remember, babies don't eat what we eat. And I think that's sometimes our mindset.
Yes.
So I always tell parents, don't measure per meal what the babies are eating. Take it over the whole day. In fact, take it over the whole week. Because, you've had kids, today they eat everything that's in your fridge. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow you go to the shops and you refill the fridge, and then it all goes fraught there because they don't eat anything for the next 2 days.
We literally just had this.
Yeah.
It's great. It's crazy.
That's what I say. That's what parenting is. You buy 6 bananas and they don't last an hour. Then you buy 12 bananas and they get those flies on them because they don't eat them. So,
absolutely.
That's what babies do.
Yeah. So babies, I always go back to that wonderful saying that one of the biggest findings of the 20th century is that babies are actually people. and
Exactly.
they'll do what people do. You know, we've medicalized them so much. Right. So I want to talk to you then about that. Kind of nicely follows on to, what are the worries with doing something like this? What are the things that parents get worried about, and what are the things that healthcare providers get worried about when we go down the road of baby-led weaning?
So I think the number one concern that I hear from every parent when we discuss this is my baby going to choke? You know, I think that is the number one worry, because they see these babies eating a drumstick of chicken and they're like, no, my child's going to choke on this. They got no teeth. They can't chew. Is this going to happen? So I always say the first rule is, whether you're using purees, whether you're using food, you never, ever leave a child alone eating. Okay, I don't think that is ever acceptable. I can tell you my 10-year-old choked the other day on a sucker. So just because you're older doesn't mean you're going to be fine. In fact, adults choke on their food.
Yeah.
So number one, we never ever leave a child alone to eat.
Sure.
The second thing is, I do think it is important that as parents, we know we have a little bit of first aid or CPR. I mean, we try and get everyone to do a CPR course, so that if something does happen, and this is whether you're doing purees or baby-led weaning, you do know what to do if something does happen. Okay, and then we always say, look at the difference between choking and gagging. Okay, and this is quite important when it comes to baby-led weaning as well. So what the paramedics teach us is that choking is silent and gagging is loud. Okay, and we actually want the kids to gag, in a sense, because what are we teaching them to do is that when something goes down my throat and I don't like where it is, I'm going to go, this is going to sound terrible on the microphone, but I'm like going to go and I'm going to cough it out. So that's another thing we are teaching them, is that something's in the wrong place, we don't like it, we do have that gag reflex, and we're going to cough it out and spit it out.
Wow.
Okay, so you panic at first, and also we teach the moms, parents, please keep saying mom, we teach the parents how to react. So now if that baby makes that and you fly at them and it's a big drama and we hitting them on the back and things, these kids are not going to be happy, and they're not going to think that's a good thing to do. When they're choking, when they're gagging, we're like, are you okay? Remember to spit it out. We teach them what to do. You actually teach them to go and teach them to spit it out, take it out of their mouth if it's a problem. And then obviously choking is a problem. Choking, they're quiet, they're going to, we need to know what to do there.
Okay, fantastic differentiation there, by the way. That's really, really good and really helpful.
Yeah, and then the other thing to do is to know, this is where I want moms to do a lot of reading on this, is to get the baby-led weaning books. Just to say, what do we give the children? Because that's the other important thing. So we always try and cut things into finger-sized foods so that they can pick them up and eat them nicely. And we always allow them to do what they're developmentally ready to do. So for example, a 6-month-old is going to have I can't think of the word now, but they grip it like, I don't know what the OTs call it, but they grip with their whole fist.
Oh, the palmar grasp.
The palmar grasp, that's the word I'm looking for. Where a much older baby will have a pincer grip.
Yep.
Okay, so we're looking at gross motor versus fine motor skills. So what the baby-led weaning principles are saying is that a baby that's not ready to eat small things won't be able to pick them up.
Oh, wow.
So like a baby's not ready to eat 1 pea at a time because it cannot pick up 1 pea at a time. So therefore we don't give them something they can choke on. So we don't give them a bowl of peanuts that they could grab a whole pile and put them in their mouth.
So
they're going to choke on them.
To come in here.
Yeah, so you need to figure out developmentally what they can do. And then things like grapes, we cut them in half so that they can't swallow a whole grape.
Okay.
Things like we don't leave the chicken skin on because that's often what they choke on. When you're giving them sausages, we sometimes try and peel a bit of the skin off because that's sometimes what they choke on. So there are a few things you do need to research a little bit. But ultimately, as long as we're doing things in nice finger-size portions, they're usually good. Babies are all good. In fact, I've never actually had a baby-led weaning baby, touch wood, actually choke. They gag often, but they don't choke.
But I mean, it's so true what you say. There are safe ways and unsafe ways to do everything. There's a safe way to put a child in a stroller and a non-safe. There are definitely safe ways
Mm.
for babies to sleep. Eating should be no exception. And it's
Yeah.
up to us to find out what are those safety protocols to be able to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your healthcare providers, you asked, they mainly worried about, is this baby getting enough nutrition? I think that's probably their biggest concern around this. And that's where your milk feeds come in. This is where your portion sizing comes in. And then you can monitor their weight and their nappies and their poos and everything. And then we should know the answer to that.
The same as you would do
simple
normally.
Any feeding, yeah.
So now is this, and I'm gonna upset a couple of people here, but is this like becoming vegan? Is it am I in this 100%? If I'm baby-led weaning, is that what's happening, or is there a middle ground?
I definitely think there's a middle ground to this, and I think that's the nice thing with all of this is you don't have to be all or nothing. So you don't have to be a pureed parent, and you don't have to be a baby-led weaning parent. I teach a lot of hybrid of this. So I say to the moms who are nervous to just do pure baby-led weaning or don't want to, is to say, well, then do both. So take both principles. So I say to them, if you're going to, I don't know why I always use butternut, but I always say butternut. If you're going to give the babies butternut, then puree what you want to feed them with a spoon, but then give them 3 finger strips of the butternut that you've prepared, same as the baby-led weaning teaches us to do, so that the babies can then see the food. So they actually know what they're eating. So they can see it, they can touch it, they can feel it, they can do the texture, and they can pick it up and gum it while you use spoon feeding to make yourself feel better that you're actually getting food into them. And they're getting a lot of the principles of the baby-led weaning, because then when you start just giving them that butternut, it's not this major change from pureed to now actual food. Because that's what a lot of the parents say to me, is they say they can't understand it, because when they were doing their purees, the kids ate everything, all their vegetables. Now it's on their plate and they're like, it looks poisonous.
Yeah.
and that's what I say to them, is it's because they've never seen it, so they're not connecting that bowl of orange mush to this nice orange square or finger or whatever of food that's now got a very different texture. So you can do both. There's no reason not to do both.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, speaking to our colleagues in the healthcare professions that are working in this pediatric space, what is the evidence behind using baby-led weaning?
So this is where the healthcare professionals get a bit iffy, because there's probably less than 20 papers on this.
Okay.
All right. And one big one called the Bliss trial, and parts of it are still actually ongoing. So we can't go out there and say, do baby-led weaning because it's better for your children.
Okay.
For your
we don't
babies.
have that. That's not.
We don't have that.
Okay.
Okay. But to be perfectly correct on both sides, is the evidence to stay spoon feeding pureed food is the best thing to do for your baby. So there's actually very little evidence around which way should be fed. Spoon feeding versus baby-led weaning. We don't have massive trials on this. So what the Bliss trial did look at is they looked at weight. So what the nice thing was, and one of the one principles around baby-led weaning is that we do responsive feeding, meaning similar to breastfeeding, we're teaching the babies to eat when they're hungry and drink when they're thirsty and stop when they're full. Okay. And this is really from on when we bottle feed, we know we sometimes overfeed the babies because of our own issues. There's 10 mils left, so we give it to them, whether they're hungry or not, because they must drink that amount. And similarly, when you're pureeing foods, it tends to be a lot quicker, and we tend to feed them, they must finish the bowl, as opposed to them deciding what they want to eat. And that was a big thing that did come out that we've seen from the Bliss trial, is that more babies in the traditional feeding method arm were above the curve for weight, because there was more overweight babies in that arm than in the baby-led weaning arm.
I get you.
So that was one significant outcome that did come. And then the problem with the rest of the evidence in the trials is a lot of it is parent reported. So as you know, someone who does a lot of evidence, That's not really the strongest evidence in the world.
Not the gold standard. I mean, but
Not the gold standard. But
having said that, it's there, and it's
yeah.
there to be looked at for what it is, and it rounds out the package of evidence we have at the moment, which is fine.
Yeah. So hard facts: we are finding the baby-led weaning babies from a long-term goal, because we've got problems in the world. We've got people starving, but we've also got a huge obesity problems.
Yeah.
So one of the goals around baby-led weaning is to actually teach people responsible eating. And we eat when we're hungry and we stop when we're full. And that is one thing that we are seeing is really working with this, is we do get babies controlling their own, is it satiety or satiety, whatever you call it, when they are full. What's the word?
Satiety. It's not satiety. Satiation.
I don't know, whatever. they know when they're full and they know when they've had enough. They know when they're full and they satiety. I don't know. They know when they're full and they know when they've had enough, and they actually stop. And we need to learn to trust that instinct in them, because that's where a lot of the problems come in with obesity, overweight. Is I'm exactly the same. We eat because it's 7 o'clock in the morning and it's breakfast, and then we eat because it's 1 o'clock, and then we eat because it's 7 o'clock, and then we eat because we're bored, and then we eat because we're happy, and then we eat because we're cross. So there's this emotional component, there's this timed component, all of it to it, where on the day we're not hungry, we shouldn't eat.
Yeah.
And then the day that we're really hungry, we should eat more. And same with drinking water.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
No, it's fantastic. As you were talking about, learning portion control, learning how much to eat, learning to stop when you should stop. There's this little voice in my head going, "Wow, that would have been a good thing to learn."
Yeah.
Because now we sit down to eat and we have to fight all of these things that have been with us for years and years and years. So again, with parents with that top thing on their mind going, how can I do the best for my child? This is one of the best things that you can do for them. It's a life lesson that starts right from the beginning.
Exactly. And I mean, this is why the lactation consultants have taken this on quite wholeheartedly, because it's one of our core values is that we do demand feeding, and we're actually changing the wording to more responsive feeding. So we look at the baby's cues, we see when they're hungry, and we feed them, not on a schedule. And we know all the benefits for that. So now all this is doing is carrying that through into the next stage, saying, let's let the babies choose how much they want to eat and respect when they're full. And then we just guide them. We always make it available for them.
Yeah. I like it. Sister Samantha Crompton, it is always amazing to talk to you. You always bring so much to these. Thank you very, very much for being part of this. And I learned a lot, which is obviously why I do these things, because I like learning, and I especially like learning.
No, we have to. We have to get good information out there. It's people need to learn lots of things as much as possible. And even if it's not learning, it's about saying, I've never heard of that. I'm going to go research it myself. And that's what empowers people to make their own decisions at the end of the day.
That's the way. Good, man. Thank you very, very much. And I'm sure, if there's any questions or whatever on this, I'm sure we will get back to you. Welcome to email and send in comments and what have you. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for tuning in. We will see you soon.